You've prepared for this moment. You've studied the questions, rehearsed your answers, and even imagined yourself walking into the interview room with confidence. And then it happens, the interviewer leans in, smiles, and says, "Tell me about yourself." Suddenly, everything disappears. Your mind goes blank. Your English feels smaller than it really is, and you struggle to find the words you already know. If this has ever happened to you, you're not alone, and it's not a language problem. It's a confidence and strategy problem. In today's episode of Learn English Lab, we're going to fix that. You'll learn how to answer interview questions with clarity, structure, and real professional confidence. Let's turn pressure into power.
Oh man, that really is like the universal nightmare scenario, isn't it?
It really is.
And, looking at the incredible stack of notes and research you sent us for this deep dive, it's just so clear that we need to unpack the psychology here, the underlying architecture and the cultural nuances of acing these high-stakes professional conversations, especially when you're operating in a language that, isn't your first.
Well, I am so glad you sent us these materials, listener, because this is a topic that clearly resonates with you. And frankly, with anyone who has ever felt that sheer panic just set in.
Right.
Looking through the data you compiled, I really want to start by addressing the elephant in the room here. Why does the brain just shut down?
It's fascinating, really.
Because, you have people who are completely fluent in their day-to-day lives. You know, they run meetings in English, they write these complex emails, they joke with their colleagues at the water cooler.
Absolutely.
And yet the second they sit across from a hiring manager, they hit this wall and think, what is wrong with me? Why am I suddenly sounding like I just opened a beginner's textbook?
Yeah, that's such a common feeling. And what stands out to me in the psychological studies you included in your research is that, well, the answer has absolutely nothing to do with grammar or vocabulary.
Really? Nothing?
Nothing at all. It comes down to this concept known as cognitive load. So if we think of the human brain like a computer's processor, right?
Okay, yeah.
In a standard, relaxed conversation with a friend, you might be utilizing maybe 20 or 30% of your processing power. The words just flow naturally because there's no perceived threat.
Right, you're just chatting over coffee.
Exactly. Wait, absolutely. But a job interview is undeniably one of the most high-pressure communication events a human being can endure.
For sure.
The stakes are your livelihood, your career trajectory, your ego.
Yeah, it's essentially a threat environment as far as your nervous system is concerned. Your amygdala is just firing off, telling you that you're being judged.
Identically that. Even a native speaker experiences a massive spike in anxiety and a heavy cognitive load in that room. Now you add the monumental layer of performing in a second or third language.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that cognitive load just becomes unsustainable. The system simply overloads.
Let's break down what's actually happening in the brain during that overload, because I think, understanding the mechanics really helps remove the shame you might feel when you freeze up. Because you aren't just talking. According to the cognitive science papers in your notes, you are juggling this impossible number of parallel processes.
Without a doubt. In that specific moment, your brain is attempting to execute 6 or 7 intense simultaneous tasks.
6 or 7?
Yeah. First, you're actively listening to the interviewer's question, trying to catch every subtle nuance, tone, and implication.
Okay.
Second, if your brain's default operating system is still your native language, you're likely translating that English question into your mother tongue just to fully grasp it.
Right, just to process what they even asked.
Yes. Then third, you are formulating a strategic professional answer in your head.
In your native language.
Usually, yes. Which leads to the fourth task, you are translating that formulated answer back into English.
Oh, man.
Fifth, you are actively monitoring your pronunciation and syntax to ensure you're clearly understood. Sixth, you're managing your physical body language so you don't look, visibly terrified.
Don't cross your arms, sit up straight, maintain eye contact.
All of that. And finally, seventh, you're trying to project an overarching aura of calm, competent authority.
When you lay it out like that, it's a miracle anyone can form a coherent sentence at all.
It really is.
It's essentially asking a single computer processor to render a 4K video, run a complex physics simulation, and download massive files all at the exact same time. The system crashes.
Spot on.
So for you, listening right now, sitting in the hot seat, what does this actually mean? How do you stop the crash before it happens?
Well, it means we must fundamentally change the goal. We have to accept that confidence in an interview isn't about achieving like flawless linguistic perfection.
Right.
It is about deep structural preparation. You need reliable frameworks that drastically reduce that cognitive load.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, because if you don't have to think about the structure of your answer, you free up massive amounts of processing power to focus purely on your delivery and your connection with the interviewer.
And the timing of that connection is vital. Going through the behavioral analysis in your notes, there's a statistic that absolutely floored me.
Which one?
The time frame you're working within is incredibly narrow. The research consistently shows that interviewers are making their core subconscious judgments within the first 30 to 90 seconds of the interaction.
Yeah, it is a shockingly brief window. I mean, 30 to 90 seconds is barely enough time to exchange pleasantries, discuss the weather, and, sit down in your chair.
Seriously.
But the critical insight here, and this is what you need to remember when the anxiety spikes, is that in those first 90 seconds, they are not grading your grammar.
They aren't.
Not at all. They are not mentally tallying your vocabulary words.
What are they looking for then? If they aren't grading my English, what is driving that rapid judgment?
They are assessing your energy, your clarity, and your composure. Humans are just highly evolved pattern recognition machines, right? The interviewer is asking themselves deeply subconscious survival level questions like, is this person someone I can trust? Do they communicate with clarity?
Like a gut feeling.
Yes. Will they represent this company well to our most important clients? Are they going to be a stabilizing force on my team or, an erratic one?
So it's an assessment of your professional vibration, for lack of a better term.
Accurately stated. If you can signal yes to those underlying questions of trust and competence early on, a fascinating psychological shift occurs.
What happens?
The interviewer relaxes. And more importantly, once you sense that they have relaxed, you relax.
Oh, wow.
The threat level drops, the cognitive load lightens, and your true fluency can finally emerge.
That is such a profound relief to hear. The interviewer is not holding a red pen waiting to mark down a misplaced preposition. They're just looking for a trustworthy professional.
Absolutely.
But even knowing that, if your brain is overwhelmed by those 7 simultaneous tasks, you can't just wing it. You need a reliable blueprint to fall back on. You need an architecture for your answers, so you don't have to invent a structure in real time while you're sweating under those terrible fluorescent lights.
And that brings us perfectly to the architectural foundation of a great answer. Before we even dive into specific, difficult questions, we have to understand the underlying DNA of a successful response.
Okay, let's get into it.
Based on the communication frameworks you provided, every truly great interview answer shares 3 undeniable qualities. They are clear, they are specific, and they are confident.
Clear, specific, and confident. I mean, it sounds incredibly simple when you say it out loud, but I know from personal experience that it is remarkably difficult to execute in practice.
It really is.
Let's dig into the why and the how of each of those. Let's start with clear.
Clear means that the interviewer immediately, effortlessly grasps your core point. There is no cognitive friction for the listener.
No guessing games.
Right. When candidates get nervous, they tend to engage in circular rambling. They talk around the point, hoping they will eventually stumble upon a good answer.
I have absolutely done that.
We all have. But clarity means ruthless editing. You remove the unnecessary backstory and deliver a direct, logical progression of thought.
And what about specific? I feel like this is where so many candidates, both native and non-native speakers, just fall completely flat.
Oh, specificity is the currency of credibility. Specific means you're deploying real numbers, real scenarios, and tangible, measurable outcomes.
Not just buzzwords.
Right. Far too many candidates rely on vague generalizations. They say, I am a very hard worker who improves processes.
Which means nothing.
It means absolutely nothing. A specific candidate says, I redesigned our client onboarding workflow, which reduced the processing time from 14 days to 4 days, saving the department approximately 20 hours of labor per week.
The difference in impact is night and day. The first person is asking you to trust their self-assessment. The second person is handing you undeniable proof.
Spot on.
And then the third pillar, confident. How do you define confidence in this context?
Confidence in an interview setting relates almost entirely to your delivery. It is the packaging of your clarity and your specificity.
Okay, the packaging.
Yeah. Your tone, your pacing, your eye contact, and your word choice must signal to the interviewer that you firmly believe in your own value. We will dig much deeper into the mechanics of vocal delivery later, but for now, understand that confidence is the vehicle that delivers your expertise.
To achieve that combination of clarity and specificity, the materials you sent us highlight a gold standard framework, the STAR method.
Oh, the classic.
I am a huge fan of this concept. When I look at the STAR method, I always compare it to a GPS system for an interview answer.
How so?
Well, when you're nervous, it's so incredibly easy to take a conversational detour, get completely lost in the woods of your own vocabulary, and just forget the original point you were trying to make.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you have that GPS running in the background, even if you stumble over a word or take a slight wrong turn, the framework recalculates. It ensures you still arrive at the proper destination without crashing the car.
That is a brilliant analogy. The STAR method truly acts as your navigational guardrails. Let's break down specifically what those letters stand for, because it is undeniably the ultimate storytelling framework for professionals.
Let's do it.
S stands for situation. This is where you briefly, and I emphasize briefly, set the scene and the necessary context. Where were you working? What was the general landscape of the problem?
Right, just enough context so they understand the stakes, but not, a 20-minute history of the company.
Strictly the essentials. T is for task. What was your specific role or responsibility within that situation? What were you hired or assigned to do to address the problem?
Got it.
Then we move to A, which stands for action. This is the absolute core of the answer. What did you actually tangibly do? This is where you describe your strategy, your execution, and your problem-solving process.
And the final piece?
R is for result. What was the outcome of your actions? And here is where you heavily utilize those specific numbers and measurable impacts we discussed.
Situation, task, action, result. It creates a perfect narrative arc. You have the setup, the conflict, the climax, and the resolution.
Identically that.
Okay, let's take this theoretical framework and make it incredibly real for you, the listener. Because translating the theory into practice is where the magic actually happens. Let's tackle the most common and honestly the most paralyzing opening questions.
The ones that establish baseline fit.
Yeah, the ones designed to establish your baseline professional fit. Let's look at the pitch questions.
Yes, and the absolute undisputed king of the pitch questions is, of course, tell me about yourself.
I swear my heart rate just elevated simply hearing you say that phrase. It is so unbelievably broad. What on earth do they actually want when they sit back, cross their arms, and ask that?
What's truly fascinating here, if we look at the psychological breakdown in your notes, is the massive disconnect between what the candidate hears and what the interviewer actually means. The interviewer is using this question as a baseline test of your ability to synthesize information and communicate under mild pressure. They are essentially saying, give me a concise professional summary of your value proposition.
But that is rarely what the candidate hears, is it?
No, not at all. What the candidate often hears is a wide-open invitation to deliver a meandering chronological life story, usually starting somewhere in their early childhood.
Well, I was born in a small town, and my parents always taught me the value of hard work. And then in high school, I really liked computers, so I decided to study. And you can just physically watch the interviewer's eyes glaze over as they realize they are trapped in a 10-minute monologue.
Spot on. That weak, unfocused, chronological answer is fatal because it completely lacks energy. Furthermore, it forces the interviewer to do the heavy lifting of digging through your biography to find the pieces that are actually relevant to the job they are trying to fill.
You're making them work for it.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely. A strong answer to tell me about yourself is a highly curated 90-second professional pitch. It should not move from the past to the present. Rather, it should highlight your most relevant professional peaks, and it must end by connecting directly and explicitly back to the company you are interviewing with.
I want to make sure you have a rock-solid template for this. Let's walk through a concrete example of how to execute this flawlessly.
Imagine you are applying for a senior data analyst role. Instead of the rambling chronological life story, you deliver this. I'm a data analyst with 6 years of experience working heavily at the intersection of business intelligence and strategic decision-making. I started my analytical career at a logistics firm in Berlin, where I built automated reporting systems that reduced manual data entry work by about 40%.
A nice start.
From there, I was recruited to join a fintech startup in Amsterdam, where I led a team of 3 analysts and implemented a customer segmentation model that directly contributed to a 22% increase in user retention rates over 1 year.
Great metrics.
I'm particularly passionate about translating highly complex data into clear, actionable insights for non-technical business leaders. And what brought me to your company specifically, which I'd love to talk more about today, is your recent public commitment to using data to genuinely improve healthcare outcomes, which aligns perfectly with why I originally got into this field.
Well, let's dissect that, because there is an immense amount of strategic power packed into that short paragraph. First of all, the specificity is outstanding.
Right.
You gave us geographic anchors, Berlin, Amsterdam. You gave us hard, undeniable numbers, a 40% reduction in manual work, a 22% increase in retention. You painted a picture of competence. But what I really think makes it a masterclass is the ending.
Yes, the connect.
You brought the entire narrative right to their doorstep.
If we connect this back to the core psychology of the interaction, that ending is the specific mechanism that transitions the interview from a sterile interrogation into a dynamic, peer-to-peer conversation.
Oh, that's powerful.
By ending on their goals, you are effectively saying, here is my proven value, and here is specifically why I want to apply it to your current mission. It creates a natural, irresistible opening for the interviewer to lean in and say, oh, you saw our new healthcare data initiative? Let's talk about the challenges we are facing with that right now.
It is brilliant. You are handing them the conversational baton and guiding them toward a topic where you already know you shine.
Without a doubt.
Okay, so you absolutely nail the opening pitch. The energy is good. Then comes the next heavy hitter. Why should we hire you?
Yes.
Now, I have to step in and push back a little here. Based on some of the cross-cultural communication research you included in your source stack.
Go for it.
For a lot of professionals, depending heavily on their cultural background, this question feels like a massive, uncomfortable trap. The idea of sitting up straight and boldly declaring, I am the absolute best person for this job, feels deeply unnatural, immodest, and frankly, arrogant.
This raises a profoundly important point about cross-cultural professional norms, and the discomfort you might feel is very real and totally valid.
Right.
In many cultures, humility and group harmony are prized above individual exceptionalism. But here is the critical reframe you must internalize to succeed in a Western-style corporate interview. Answering this question effectively is not an exercise in arrogance, it is an exercise in professional clarity.
How do you mean? How do we separate it from ego?
You have to remember the fundamental nature of the transaction. The company is not doing you a charitable favor by offering you a job. They have a specific business problem that is currently costing them time, money, or market share, and they desperately need a solution.
Okay.
You are that solution. When they ask, why should we hire you? They're asking you to connect the dots for them. You are simply explaining the mechanics of why your specific toolkit is the perfect remedy for their specific pain points.
I love that perspective. It removes the ego entirely. It is not, look at me, I am an amazing superstar. It is simply, I see that your plumbing is leaking, and I happen to have a highly specialized set of skills for fixing identically this type of pipe.
Perfectly stated. And the strongest, most undeniable strategy here is to directly mirror the job description they wrote.
Give me a scenario.
Let's say the original job posting heavily emphasized a need for someone who can manage complex, high-maintenance client relationships while simultaneously improving internal workflow processes.
Okay, pretty common requirements.
A weak answer simply claims, I am a hard worker and a people person. A strong, strategic answer says, you mentioned repeatedly in the job description that your team needs someone who can manage enterprise client relationships while also driving internal process improvement.
Oh, directly referencing the posting.
Yes. In my most recent role, I managed a highly demanding portfolio of 12 enterprise clients. While doing so, I noticed our onboarding process was causing friction, so I completely redesigned the workflow. That redesign reduced our client time to value from 45 days down to 28 days while maintaining a 98% client satisfaction score. I see you are facing a similar bottleneck here, and I know I can bring that same efficiency to your team.
What I find so compelling about that approach is that you are taking their own specific wish list, the things they literally wrote down in the job posting, and you are mapping your historical data strictly on top of it.
Yes.
You aren't forcing them to guess if your background is relevant. You are doing the cognitive labor for them. You are showing them the proof that you have already solved their problem somewhere else.
Absolutely. You are speaking directly to their immediate needs, quantifying your success, and actively connecting your proven past to their desired future.
Okay, let's keep moving down the list of the core pitch questions. The next one is, why do you want this job?
Yeah.
Now, based on the transcripts of bad interviews in your notes, This feels like a place where candidates rely heavily on generic, empty praise. They say things like, "Oh, your company has a very good reputation in the industry, and I want to work for a good, stable company where I can learn."
Which is a completely forgettable, wasted answer. You have to assume the interviewer has heard that identically that same generic sentiment 30 times that week. It carries no weight.
They just tune it out.
Completely. They ask this question to uncover 3 very specific things. Did you put in the effort to actually research us? Are you genuinely interested in the mechanics of this specific role, or are you just desperately firing out resumes for any available paycheck? And finally, do your professional values actually align with our corporate culture?
So how do you prove all of that without sounding like you just memorized their Wikipedia page in the lobby 10 minutes ago?
You prove it by referencing deep, specific, and recent research. You mention particular initiatives, recent press releases, or strategic shifts.
For example,
Instead of generic praise, you might say, your company's evolving approach to supply chain sustainability in the consumer goods space is something I find genuinely compelling. I've been closely following your recent partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and your Q3 impact report showed a 30% reduction in packaging waste.
Oh, wow.
That signals to me that you are making real operational progress, not just engaging in good PR. I want to bring my logistics expertise to a team that is actually executing on that level.
That is so specific.
And if you have done the networking work, you can even name drop appropriately to show deep engagement. From the informational conversations I've had with people on your team over the last month, like Sarah in product marketing, it is clear that the culture here highly values independent thinking and rapid iteration.
If I were an interviewer and I heard that answer, I would practically drop my pen. It proves unequivocally that you didn't just blind apply to 50 random jobs on a job board. You targeted them. You studied their strategy. You networked with their people.
That is how you stand out.
Okay, the last of the foundational pitch questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I have always hated this question. It feels like I am being asked to predict the future, or like it's a trap to see if I am overly ambitious.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychological fear driving the interviewer. When they ask about your 5-year plan, they are not actually asking for a prophetic vision of your life.
And what do they want then?
They are secretly, selfishly wondering, is this person going to leave us immediately? Are we about to invest 6 months and thousands of dollars training this candidate, only for them to jump to our biggest competitor the second they get a better offer?
Which means if I come in hot and say, my goal is to be a CEO or a founder in 5 years, that might actually backfire spectacularly if I'm applying for a mid-level execution role.
It absolutely can. While ambition is generally good, uncalibrated ambition can sound like you are already planning your exit strategy before you've even been hired. The sophisticated strategy here is to firmly ground your ambition in mastering the current role first. You want to communicate a trajectory of growth that stays within their ecosystem.
How would you phrase that?
You might structure it like this. In the short term, my primary goal is to deeply master the technical and relational aspects of this specific role and become a high-impact contributor to this team. Once I have established that foundation over the next 3 to 5 years, I would love the opportunity to take on more cross-functional leadership responsibilities, potentially managing a team or leading larger strategic initiatives, ideally right here within this organization.
That strikes the perfect balance. You are signaling, I am hungry, I want to grow, and I want to lead, but I recognize I need to deliver massive, undeniable value in the job you are actually hiring me for first. It reassures them while still showing drives.
Yes.
Okay, so at this point in the interview, you have firmly established your value. The interviewer likes your pitch. They see the alignment. Now, we are shifting gears into section 3 of our analysis, navigating the vulnerability traps.
The dangerous part.
Because human nature dictates that once an interviewer likes you, they have to test their hypothesis. They have to poke at your weak spots to see if you are too good to be true.
And this is specifically where many candidates, especially non-native speakers, who might already be feeling a heightened sense of vulnerability due to the language barrier, tend to stumble and lose their footing.
For sure.
The absolute classic foundational vulnerability test is, of course, what are your strengths and weaknesses?
This question feels so incredibly old school, almost cliche. But looking at the HR surveys you provided, hiring managers are still asking it constantly.
They love it.
Let's tackle the strengths half first. When candidates hear this, it seems so easy to just start listing off a string of positive adjectives. I'm a team player, I'm highly motivated, I'm hardworking, I'm punctual.
Adjectives without evidence are just noise. Anyone can claim to be a team player. The correct, high-impact approach is to choose one or two specific strengths that are strictly relevant to the core demands of the role and immediately attach undeniable narrative evidence to them.
Show, don't tell.
Right. Instead of throwing out a generic claim like, I am a good communicator, you anchor it. You say, I would say one of my greatest strengths is my ability to translate highly complex technical information into clear narratives for non-technical audiences.
And then provide the example.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my previous role as an engineer, I noticed the sales team was struggling to explain our new software architecture to clients. So I proactively developed a series of visual dashboards and plain language guides that translated our engineering data into business outcomes. It became the standard presentation format across the entire sales department.
Specificity wins the day yet again.
Yeah.
You aren't just claiming a trait, you are proving a capability.
Yeah.
But it is the second half of that question, the weakness, that is the real psychological trap.
Oh, it is.
I know the standard advice that gets passed around on internet forums.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they are being clever when they say, my biggest weakness is that I just work too hard, or I am a terrible perfectionist and I care too much about the quality of my work.
I want to be incredibly clear and emphatic about this point. The fake weakness is actively dangerous to your candidacy. Interviewers are completely immune to it. They see through it instantly.
It's so transparent.
Best case scenario, it insults their intelligence and makes them roll their eyes. Worst case scenario, it makes you appear profoundly dishonest, evasive, or entirely lacking in critical self-awareness.
But wait, if I can't use a fake weakness, that means I actually have to confess to something I am genuinely bad at. While I am actively trying to convince them to give me a job, that feels like career suicide.
It feels risky, yes, but it is deeply strategic if executed correctly. The architecture of a perfect answer involves offering a genuine but non-fatal weakness and then immediately pivoting to showcase the active, ongoing steps you have taken to mitigate or overcome it.
Showing that you're working on it.
Well, absolutely. You are demonstrating the highly desirable meta skill of self-correction. For instance, you might share a struggle with delegation from earlier in your career.
Like taking on too much.
Yes. You could say, earlier in my career, particularly when I first transitioned into a management role, I had a real tendency to take on too much of the execution work personally. I wanted to ensure strict quality control, so I struggled to let go. But I quickly realized this was creating bottlenecks for the team and limiting my own strategic bandwidth.
And then the pivot.
Over the past 2 years, I have been much more intentional about building systems for delegation. I now focus on defining clear ownership and success metrics for tasks up front, which gives my team the space to make decisions and execute without me micromanaging.
That is a brilliant construction because it demonstrates such a high level of professional maturity. You identified a legitimate flaw in your operating system, you took ownership of the negative impact it was having, and you actively built a new protocol to fix it.
That's the formula.
Speaking of acknowledging flaws, what happens when the interviewer escalates the pressure? What about when they lean in and ask, tell me about a time you faced a major challenge? Or even more terrifying, tell me about a time you failed.
If we connect this to the broader picture of modern corporate psychology, we have to understand how failure is viewed at top-tier organizations. In innovative companies, someone who has never failed is someone who has never taken meaningful risks.
Right.
True innovation absolutely requires risk, and risk guarantees occasional failure. Therefore, if a candidate sits in an interview and claims they have never experienced a significant failure, the interviewer assumes one of two things. Either the candidate is lying, or they are far too timid and risk-averse to drive innovation.
Wow.
Furthermore, if you cannot openly discuss and learn from past failures, the fear is that you will simply repeat your mistakes on their dime.
That makes total sense in theory. But in practice, how do we structure the narrative of a massive failure without sounding utterly incompetent?
There is a very strict, highly effective formula for this narrative. Describe the failure honestly, take absolute, unmitigated ownership, show the underlying lesson, and demonstrate the subsequent growth.
Let's hear a detailed example of that.
Imagine a candidate saying, "A few years ago, I was tasked with leading a cross-functional initiative to completely overhaul our vendor procurement process. I was under pressure to deliver quickly, so I moved fast and essentially bypassed the finance department in the early planning stages.
Uh-oh.
When I finally presented the final recommendations to the executive team, the finance director raised significant, valid objections regarding compliance. Because I had excluded her team's input, the entire initiative had to be paused, and we lost 3 months of momentum."
Ouch. I actually felt a knot in my stomach just hearing that. That is a real painful, expensive failure. There is absolutely no sugarcoating the fact that the candidate messed up.
Accurately observed. And that honesty builds massive trust. But then the candidate must immediately pivot to the lesson and the systemic change. It was an incredibly frustrating and humbling experience. But it taught me a leadership principle that I now live by. Speed without alignment creates massive rework. Since that failure, I have fundamentally changed how I run projects. I now build comprehensive stakeholder mapping into every single initiative from day one. By bringing critical voices like finance or legal into the room earlier, the initial planning takes slightly longer, but it almost always results in faster, dramatically more durable outcomes.
Speed without alignment creates rework. I'm genuinely going to write that down and put it on my desk. That narrative is so powerful because you aren't pointing fingers.
Nope.
You aren't saying, well, the finance director was being unreasonable. You are looking the interviewer in the eye and saying, I caused a problem, I relentlessly analyzed the root cause of my behavior, and I upgraded my professional operating system so I will never make that specific mistake again.
That is the very essence of emotional intelligence, which hiring managers at elite companies are constantly hungrily hunting for.
Which leads us right into another highly emotionally charged vulnerability test. Describe a time you had a conflict at work. Now, the cultural analysis in your notes heavily emphasizes how this question can be a massive stumbling block.
Oh, a huge one.
In many cultures, the very concept of having a conflict with a colleague is viewed as deeply shameful. It implies that you lack harmony, respect, or social grace.
This is a profound cultural divide that we must bridge. In Western, low-context professional environments, this question is absolutely not a test to see if you are a combative, aggressive person. It is a test of your capacity for professional conflict resolution.
Okay, that's a big distinction.
In a fast-paced, high-stakes business environment, tension over resources, timelines, and priorities is not just likely, it is completely inevitable. The interviewer knows there will be friction. They want undeniable proof that when that friction occurs, you can navigate the interpersonal dynamics professionally and productively.
I imagine the intense temptation here is to subtly paint yourself as the absolute flawless hero of the story and frame the coworker as a cartoonish villain who is totally unreasonable and obstructive.
Which is the single fastest way to completely fail the behavioral assessment. If you make the other person the villain in your story, the interviewer will immediately subconsciously assume that you are actually the difficult, rigid one to work with.
Right, because you're throwing them under the bus.
Exactly. The winning strategy is to demonstrate curiosity, empathy, and a drive for mutual alignment. You should describe a genuine structural disagreement regarding priorities or strategy, not a petty personal squabble.
Give me a tangible example of how to frame that structural disagreement.
Let's say you are describing a conflict with a colleague on the product team over the upcoming quarterly roadmap. You, from the engineering side, desperately wanted to dedicate the quarter to fixing technical infrastructure and reducing technical debt. Your colleague, however, was vehemently pushing to ship shiny new client features.
A classic battle.
Very common. Instead of describing how you escalated the issue to upper management to force your way, you describe your approach to resolution. You asked her for a one-on-one coffee to truly understand her perspective.
Finding the root cause.
Yes. During that conversation, you discovered she was under intense, undocumented pressure from the enterprise sales team to deliver a specific feature to close a massive deal pressure you hadn't previously realized existed.
Interesting.
By taking the time to understand her underlying business needs, rather than just arguing about the outcome, you collaborated to create a 70-30 prioritization framework, dedicating 70% of the sprint to the client features she needed and 30% to the critical technical debt you needed.
That paints such a different picture than I argued my point until she finally gave up and agreed with me. You demonstrated deep empathy, you gathered new data, and you built a sustainable compromise.
It's all about maturity.
Okay, let's look at the final and perhaps most dangerous vulnerability trap. Why did you leave your previous job? Or why are you looking to leave your current role?
The golden rule here, and I cannot stress enough that this is entirely non-negotiable, is that you must never, under any circumstances, speak negatively about a past employer or manager.
Never.
This holds true even if your boss was a literal tyrant, even if the company's culture was a toxic, chaotic mess, and even if every single one of your complaints is 100% justified and documented.
I know this is the rule, but I want to push back on the why. If a company was genuinely abusive or unethical, and I left because I have high standards, why can't I just state the truth? Shouldn't they value my honesty?
It comes down to the psychology of projection and risk assessment. The interviewer does not know your old boss. They do not know the context of your old company's culture. The only data point they have in that room is the person sitting directly in front of them, complaining and assigning blame.
Ah, I see.
Psychologically, it raises immediate glaring red flags about your professionalism, your discretion, and your loyalty. They will inevitably wonder, if things get tough here, is this how they're going to talk about us in 6 months?
That's a fair point.
You must completely neutralize the past and frame your departure purely around a forward-looking desire for growth.
So how do you phrase that pivot without sounding evasive?
You honor the past and then firmly pivot to the future. You say something along the lines of, I had an excellent 4 years with my previous team, and I am genuinely proud of the foundational systems we built during that time. However, I recently reached a point in my development where I realized I needed a new caliber of challenge, specifically a larger operational scope and exposure to a different industry context.
Is that clean?
When I saw the trajectory of your team and the scale of the problems you were solving, this opportunity felt like a genuine strategic evolution for my career, rather than just a lateral move.
That is incredibly smooth. You're essentially saying, I outgrew the pot I was planted in, and I am looking for a bigger garden. It reframes leaving as a sign of ambition rather than a sign of conflict.
Perfect.
Okay, we have survived the vulnerability traps.
Yep.
Now I want to transition to section 4 of the materials you provided, which focuses on flipping the script and taking control. Because an interview is fundamentally not an interrogation. It is a two-way business meeting.
Absolutely.
And the final moments of that meeting are often where the lasting, durable impression is cemented. But before we get to the very end, your notes highlight a fascinating category of questions: the surprise behavioral traps.
Yes, the trick questions. These are designed specifically to disrupt your rehearsed narratives and test your underlying discipline.
Oh boy.
A classic, highly effective example is when the interviewer leans back and casually asks, if you could change one thing about your last manager, what would it be?
Oh, that is incredibly sneaky. We literally just established the absolute golden rule of never complaining about a past employer, and then they explicitly directly invite you to complain about your boss.
Yeah.
It feels like a setup.
It is entirely a setup. It is a stress test of your professional discipline. If you take the bait and say, well, if I had to change one thing, it's that he was highly disorganized and never gave me clear feedback, you have fallen straight into the trap. You sound negative and critical.
So what's the move?
The highly skillful approach is to utilize this dangerous question to showcase your advanced self-awareness regarding differing working styles without assigning moral or professional blame to the manager.
Walk me through how you thread that needle. How do you answer the question without actually criticizing them?
You reframe the flaw as a difference in style and then highlight how you manage the situation. You might say, honestly, I was fortunate to have a very strong collaborative relationship with my last manager. If I were to identify one specific area where our innate working styles differed, it would be regarding the frequency of structured feedback.
Framing it as a style difference.
Yes. I tend to thrive in environments with regular systematic check-ins to ensure our priorities remain perfectly calibrated. She, on the other hand, preferred a much more organic, as-needed communication style, trusting us to execute independently.
And then the solution.
Recognizing that gap in our styles, I started proactively scheduling brief 15-minute weekly syncs with her. It provided me with the structure I needed while keeping her informed without overwhelming her schedule, which actually ended up working really well for both of us.
That is a masterclass in diplomacy. You completely avoided saying she was a bad manager.
Yeah.
You just labeled her style as organic. And more importantly, you demonstrated how you proactively managed upwards to get the resources you needed to be successful. You took ownership of the relationship.
That's what they want to see.
Okay, so we've navigated the traps. The interview is winding down. The hiring manager closes their notebook, looks across the table, and asks the inevitable closing question. Do you have any questions for us?
The final test.
Looking at the behavioral data, I think a huge percentage of candidates just heave a massive sigh of release that the interrogation is over and say, "Nope, I think you covered everything perfectly, thanks."
Which is, without a doubt, a catastrophic missed opportunity. Saying you have no questions loudly signals a lack of strategic thinking, a lack of preparation, and, frankly, a lack of genuine curiosity about the environment where you might be spending the majority of your waking hours for the next several years.
You have to ask something.
You should always walk into the room with 3 to 5 highly strategic questions prepared.
And I am guessing that asking, "How many vacation days do I get?" or "Can I work from home on Fridays?" are not the strategic questions we are looking for here.
Definitely not. Those are HR-level logistical questions that you reserve for after you have the actual job offer in your hand. In the interview, you want to ask questions that demonstrate deep strategic engagement with the reality of the role. For example, asking, "If I were hired, what specific metrics would you be looking at to determine if I had been successful at the 6-month mark?" Or, "How would you describe the day-to-day leadership style of the core team I would be working with most closely?"
I love those. Wow. Gives you pause. You're basically sitting there and asking them to tell you to your face if they have any lingering doubts or reasons to reject you. That takes a monumental amount of confidence.
It requires immense courage, yes. But think deeply about the psychological and strategic leverage it gives you in that final moment. If the interviewer has a lingering concern, perhaps they secretly think you don't have quite enough experience with a specific software platform they use, they are absolutely going to write that concern down as a negative mark the second you leave the room.
Right. They'll just write it down and reject you.
But by asking this bold question, you invite them to voice that hidden concern while you are still sitting right there. It gives you the immediate opportunity to address the doubt, provide additional context, and completely correct the misunderstanding before the decision is finalized.
That is a total paradigm shift. You are literally sweeping the hidden obstacles out of your own path before you walk out the door. It is brilliant.
It works wonders.
Okay, let's pivot to section 5 of the materials, because up until this point, we've spent a massive amount of time focusing heavily on what to say. The frameworks, the star architecture, the specific phrasing for difficult questions.
Right.
But the acoustic research in your notes makes a compelling argument that how you sound is arguably just as critical as the words you choose. A thoroughly average sentence delivered with profound authority will often land much better than a nervous, rushed, but grammatically flawless sentence. We need to talk about the mechanics of authority: tone, delivery, and vocabulary.
This is perfectly the arena where highly competent non-native speakers routinely sabotage their own authority without ever realizing it. The very first vocal delivery technique we must deeply analyze is the issue of speed.
Speed.
There is a universal, deeply ingrained psychological urge when speaking a second language under immense pressure. The overwhelming desire to rush through it. The anxious brain calculates, if I speak as quickly as humanly possible, I will get through this dangerous linguistic territory and finish my sentence before I accidentally make a grammatical error.
I know that feeling identically. It is like trying to run across a frozen lake where you hear the ice cracking. You just sprint and pray you make it to the other side before the ice breaks and you fall in.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy for the internal sensation. But the physiological reality is that speed actually causes more errors, not fewer. When you rush, your mouth outpaces your brain's internal translation capacity.
You trip over your own words.
Yes. You stumble over syllables, your syntax fragments, and worse, the interviewer's brain struggles to parse the rapid-fire, heavily accented English. The ultimate antidote to this panic response is the mastery of the micro-silence pause.
Micro-silence.
You must consciously, physically force yourself to slow your rate of speech down by 20%. A measured, deliberate pace, punctuated with brief, 1-second pauses after key data points, does not signal hesitation to the listener. Counterintuitively, it signals profound, grounded confidence.
So it's about embracing the silence, letting the critical point land in the room and ring in the interviewer's ears before you rush to fill the void.
Well, absolutely.
The second delivery technique mentioned in your notes, it's about inflection. And this is a linguistic habit I notice constantly, even among native speakers who lack confidence. I always compare an upward inflection to putting a giant question mark at the very end of your resume.
That is a wonderful, highly evocative way to describe the phenomenon. Upward inflection, also known as upspeak, occurs when the musical pitch of your voice rises at the very end of a declarative statement, making it sound phonetically identically to a question.
Right.
For example, a candidate might say, "I managed a team of 10 people." It completely undermines the assertion. It sounds as though you are asking the interviewer for permission to believe your own historical experience.
Right. I increased quarterly sales by 20%. It makes me, as a listener, subconsciously doubt if it actually happened, because the speaker doesn't sound entirely convinced themselves.
To project authority, you must actively train your vocal cords to utilize a downward inflection. You must deliberately drop the pitch of your voice slightly on the final word of an important sentence.
Like a definitive stop.
Yes, I managed a team of 10 people. I increased quarterly sales by 20%. It anchors the sentence. It projects a definitive, undeniable authority that commands respect in a professional setting.
Let's talk about the specific words themselves. Your notes highlight the danger of apologetic language. I hear this continuously from incredibly smart, highly educated people who just lack that final, polished layer of linguistic confidence.
It is a genuine tragedy to sit in an interview and hear a brilliant candidate preface a highly strategic, insightful answer with phrases like, "I'm not completely sure if this is the right answer, or, sorry, my English isn't perfect, but I'll try to explain."
It's just shooting yourself in the foot.
By doing this, you are actively, voluntarily degrading your own professional credibility before you have even made your point. We have to ruthlessly eliminate those mitigating phrases from your vocabulary entirely.
What do we use instead?
You must replace them with strong, neutral transitions. Instead of preemptively apologizing for your explanation, simply take a breath and say, "To give you a concrete example of how I approach this," and dive straight into the factual data.
Let's actively build up that vocabulary toolkit for the listener. Based on the linguistic analysis you provided, give us some examples of the high-impact verbs and business idioms that instantly upgrade the perception of an answer from competent to authoritative.
The specific verbs you choose to describe your past actions carry immense psychological weight. Instead of using passive or weak verbs like "I helped" or "I led," you want to utilize power verbs.
Okay, give me some power verbs.
Try replacing "I led" with "I spearheaded." Instead of saying "I combined different reports," say "I synthesized the data." Other incredibly strong power verbs include orchestrated, navigated, leveraged, optimized, and cultivated.
Let's hear that in context. I orchestrated a cross-departmental merger. That simply sounds so much more authoritative and deliberate than I helped put the two departments together.
Absolutely.
What about idioms? I know from personal experience that idioms can be an absolute minefield for non-native speakers because they rarely translate logically.
They are definitely tricky, but mastering a few carefully selected business idioms demonstrates a level of deep cultural fluency that impresses hiring managers.
Like which ones?
Utilizing phrases like "hit the ground running," which communicates your ability to start contributing productively immediately without extensive hand-holding, or "move the needle," which means making a genuinely meaningful, measurable impact on a core business metric.
That's a good one.
If you look at an interviewer in the eye and say, "In my first 90 days, my priority is identifying the operational bottlenecks where I can actually move the needle," you are speaking the very specific dialect of modern corporate leadership.
Nice.
Another vital concept to articulate is getting buy-in, which refers to the critical soft skill of achieving agreement and active support from skeptical stakeholders.
Here's where it gets highly intriguing, though. Based on the emotional intelligence research in your stack, it is not purely about sounding like a walking corporate textbook and throwing around jargon.
Right.
There is an entire category of phrasing designed strictly to signal high emotional intelligence,
Yes.
or EQ, to the interviewer.
Yes, and this is critical because top-tier interviewers are aggressively, constantly screening for EQ alongside technical skills. You want to deliberately embed phrasing that demonstrates you can manage complex emotions and interpersonal friction effectively.
What does that sound like?
Using phrases like, "I made a point of actively acknowledging their concerns before sharing my own perspective," or "rather than reacting immediately to the delay, I paused to look at the broader operational picture."
Oh, that's really smooth.
When you use these sentences, you are subliminally telling the interviewer that you are a highly mature, stabilizing, and rational force, someone who will lower the blood pressure of the team rather than raise it.
Okay, we are moving into the final major phase of our analysis, Section 6. Overcoming common pitfalls and cultural misalignments. Because the reality is, even if you have absolutely mastered the STAR method and your downward inflection is flawless and you are dropping power verbs left and right, there are unseen cultural expectations that can still totally derail an interview.
Definitely.
Let's start with the biggest internal neurological hurdle highlighted in the research, the translation loop.
The translation loop is the invisible, massive hidden drain on your cognitive energy. If your brain's default resting operating system is still firmly rooted in your native language, you are forcing yourself through a grueling four-step process for every single interaction.
You mentioned this earlier.
Right. You are listening to the English audio, translating it internally to your native language to comprehend it, formulating your complex response in your native language, and then frantically translating that response back into English to speak it aloud. This continuous loop causes a massive, noticeable delay in your processing speed and completely exhausts your mental bandwidth within 20 minutes.
It is identically like having terrible ping or latency in a fast-paced online video game. There is this unavoidable lag between the input and the output, and it makes you look slower than you actually are. How do you permanently fix that lag?
You have to aggressively break the neurological loop through daily, relentless immersion. You have to physically shift the brain's default operating language.
Just flip the switch.
It takes time, but you do this by actively narrating your mundane daily life in English. When you are commuting to work on the train, force your internal monologue to observe the environment in English. When you are cooking dinner, have the internal debate about the ingredients and the recipe entirely in English.
Oh, that's a great exercise.
Over a sustained period of weeks and months, the brain's neuroplasticity takes over. The neural pathways adapt to the new demand, and eventually you develop the ability to access and generate English directly, completely bypassing the native language gateway.
That makes total sense. Stop treating English as a decryption exercise and start physically living in it. Moving beyond the internal translation, what are some of the other advanced, highly specific mistakes that you see even very fluent C1 or C2 level speakers making in these high-stakes environments?
The first, and arguably the most common advanced mistake, is scripting. Because high-level speakers want to be perfect, they will write out their STAR method answers word for word on a document and attempt to memorize them like a theatrical monologue.
I used to do this.
The result is always disastrous because it sounds incredibly robotic. The interviewer can literally see your eyes tracking the invisible text in the air as you desperately search for the next memorized word.
It's so awkward to watch.
The correct approach is to memorize the broad architectural structure, the bullet points of the STAR outline, but allow the specific transitional words to emerge naturally and organically in the moment.
What about the issue of length? I feel like fluency sometimes works against people here.
It absolutely does. Excessive length is a major trap for advanced speakers. Because they possess a vast vocabulary, they sometimes love to showcase it, and they will talk continuously for 4 or 5 minutes in response to a single question.
Too much data.
Yes. In a professional setting, excessive length is viewed as a lack of focus. Your answers, no matter how complex the topic, should strictly cap at a maximum of 90 seconds to 2.5 minutes. The ability to be concise while handling complex data is a premium, highly sought-after executive skill.
And what about the temptation to use giant $10 vocabulary words to sound more authoritative?
That leads to utilizing an overly academic register, which is another common pitfall, saying things like, I utilize an efficacious paradigm to synthesize the deliverables, instead of simply saying, I built an effective process to combine the reports.
Nobody actually talks like that in a meeting.
Well, spot on. It does not make you sound smarter or more competent. It makes you sound alien, like you swallowed a 19th century academic textbook. Modern, elite professional English prioritizes aggressive clarity, directness, and accessibility above all else.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the global landscape, because your research heavily emphasizes that this is where profound cultural misalignment really occurs. Interviewing for a multinational company in different geographic regions means you are playing by entirely different unwritten rule books.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the dominant paradigm, American corporate interview culture. What are the specific rules of engagement there?
American corporate culture highly, almost exclusively, values outward enthusiasm, compelling narrative storytelling, unrelenting optimism, and highly direct self-advocacy.
They want to show.
Yes. An American interviewer wants to see visible energy. They want your career history packaged as an engaging narrative arc. And crucially, it is completely acceptable and, in fact, entirely expected to look them in the eye and directly state that you are exceptionally good at what you do.
Which feels weird to a lot of cultures.
Very weird. But if you employ too much modesty or self-deprecation, an American interviewer will simply take you at your word and assume you genuinely lack confidence or baseline competence.
Okay, so that is the high-energy, narrative-driven American model. Contrast that with the British corporate culture, which many international professionals also have to navigate.
British professional culture is almost the exact mirror image of the American model in this specific regard. It deeply values understatement and nuance.
Very different.
Overt, highly enthusiastic self-promotion can easily be viewed as boastful, aggressive, or lacking in social awareness. British interviewers often prefer the use of light, strategic self-deprecation as a tool to build interpersonal rapport.
So tone it down.
Crucially, they value hard evidence over bold assertion, meaning do not sit there and enthusiastically tell them you are a brilliant strategist. Instead, calmly and quietly provide the undeniable data sets that logically prove you are a brilliant strategist. Additionally, there's typically a much higher expectation of initial formality before the conversation relaxes.
That is a fascinating dichotomy. So in America, you walk in with high energy, saying, I am incredibly excited to be here. Let me tell you the story of how I revolutionized my last department.
Yes.
In the UK, it is much more effective to say, I have had some measure of success implementing operational efficiencies, as you will see detailed in the data. What about German interview culture, which is another massive hub for international professionals?
German corporate culture fundamentally prizes deep, verifiable technical expertise, extreme precision, blunt directness, and a clear awareness of structural hierarchy.
Very straightforward then.
They are significantly less interested in the charismatic, emotional storytelling that American interviewers adore. They want unambiguous, highly structured communication regarding your specific technical capabilities and certifications.
Good to know.
And here is a critical point. If they ask you a highly technical question and you do not know the answer, say so directly and immediately. Attempting to charm your way through a gap in your knowledge or offering a vague, high-energy answer to mask your ignorance will fail spectacularly and immediately in a German interview context.
And finally, what about the new universal culture that we all find ourselves living in now? The remote international Zoom interview. What are the unwritten rules of the virtual space?
There is a very strict, rapidly solidifying etiquette for virtual interviews that many candidates still completely ignore, to their detriment. First, your visual environment matters immensely. Your virtual background must be strictly professional, well-lit, and entirely distraction-free. You are framing their perception of you.
Don't have a messy bed in the background.
Exactly. Second, you must actively compensate for the inevitable audio delay of international connections by consciously speaking slightly slower and leaving much longer pauses after the interviewer finishes speaking, ensuring you do not accidentally interrupt or speak over them.
The dreaded Zoom interruption.
And most crucially of all, and this requires immense discipline, you must train yourself to look directly into the camera lens of your webcam, not down at the human faces on your screen, in order to accurately simulate true, confident eye contact for the interviewer on the other end.
Looking at a tiny glowing green light instead of the actual human face feels so incredibly unnatural and isolating. But you are right, it makes all the difference in the world on their end of the transmission. Okay, we're coming to the end of our incredibly deep dive into the materials you provided. Let's move to the outro.
The big takeaway.
We have given you, the listener, a truly massive toolkit today. We've covered the architectural frameworks, the vocabulary, the vocal mechanics, and the deep cultural insights. But reading through the concluding thoughts in your research, there's a fundamental mindset shift that must occur to make any of this tactical advice actually work.
Yes, this is the single most vital, foundational psychological takeaway of everything we have discussed today. If you are a professional operating in a second language, you must absolutely stop apologizing for your accent. You must stop attempting to hide or minimize your international background. Stop viewing it as a deficit. The reality is that operating a complex, high-stakes professional career across different languages and different cultural frameworks requires an immense amount of cognitive flexibility. It builds profound, battle-tested resilience and massive emotional intelligence.
So what you're saying is, the very thing people are insecure about is actually their biggest competitive advantage. It is a feature, not a bug.
Without a doubt. In a rapidly globalizing economy, an international background is not a handicap. It is a rare, highly valuable, and highly sought-after superpower. The candidates who truly succeed at the highest levels are the ones who proudly lean into that unique advantage rather than constantly trying to shrink themselves to fit into a standardized native speaker mold.
I absolutely love that framing. You are a global professional. Own that identity completely. Okay, here's the call to action for you listening right now, based on the exercises in your notes. We challenge you to a 10-minute execution exercise.
Do it tonight.
Sometime today, before your head hits the pillow and you go to sleep, pick 3 of the difficult interview questions we discussed. Perhaps the weakness question or the failure narrative. Set a timer on your phone for specifically 10 minutes. Turn on the voice memo recorder and answer those 3 questions out loud in an empty room, utilizing the STAR method and the downward inflection we practiced.
It works.
I know it feels deeply uncomfortable and awkward, but physically hearing your own voice playing back to you, sounding clear, structured, and undeniably confident, is the ultimate catalyst for genuine self-belief. Do not skip this critical step.
And to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to ponder as you prepare for your next opportunity. What if you completely stopped viewing the job interview as a high-stakes, terrifying exam where a panel of hostile judges is actively searching for reasons to fail you?
That's a good question.
What if, instead, you fundamentally rewired your perception and chose to view it as the very first collaborative working meeting of your brand new job? If you approach the conversation as a peer-to-peer problem-solving session where 2 respected professionals are simply sitting down to figure out if they have the right tools to fix a mutual problem together, the entire power dynamic shifts.
It really does.
The desperation vanishes, and the anxiety simply melts away.
That is an absolutely amazing paradigm shift to end on. You aren't a terrified student begging for a passing grade. You are an expert consultant having a strategic meeting that changes the energy entirely. Thank you for providing such incredible materials for us to explore, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.